Jif peanut butter. It's that jiffing good, it doesn't really need advertising. So instead, enjoy the calming sounds of the ocean. Jif. Ooh, it's that jiffing good. Get your Jif at jif.com.
Build professional skills this semester with Adobe Creative Cloud and create standout work both in and out of the classroom. Save big on professional creativity tools. Students get 65% off Adobe Creative Cloud, including Photoshop, Illustrator, Premiere Pro, Acrobat Pro, and 20+ creative apps. No matter what project you're working on, Adobe Creative Cloud apps can help you take it to the next level. Visit adobe.com/student to learn more.
This is the Daily Blast from the New Republic, produced and presented by the DSR Network. I'm your host, Greg Sargent. The scandal around President Trump's $400 million luxury jet just won't go away. The Atlantic reports that Trump is privately telling his advisors it's humiliating for a president to fly around in an outdated jet, and he's even mused about keeping the jet after he leaves the White House. All that makes this whole story worse on multiple levels. Meanwhile, MAGA figures are increasingly breaking with Trump on this, and even some congressional Republicans are tentatively criticizing Trump for it as well, which is a true rarity. All this got us thinking that this story is actually a lot more serious and consequential than it first appears. Today we're talking about all this with Russell Berman, a staff writer at The Atlantic who co-wrote that report. Russell, thanks for coming on.
Great to be with you.
So you and Jonathan Lemire report that Trump has told aides and advisors that it's humiliating for the American president to fly in an outdated plane and that foreign leaders will laugh at him if he shows up in such a plane. One outside advisor tells you guys that he's mused about keeping the jet after his presidency. Russell, it sounds like Trump is privately angry over this whole thing. Why should he fly in an antique plane? Maybe he doesn't understand why it's a scandal? What does your reporting indicate along these lines about his mood and mindset on all this?
I mean, yeah, the sources that talk to my colleague Jonathan Lemire certainly indicate that he is angry, and he's been publicly angry. He was, when a reporter asked him about this, he said it was stupid to ask about the idea, to him, the idea that you would essentially look a gift plane in the mouth and not accept this $400 million gift from a foreign government is absurd. And to everybody else, the idea that you would accept this gift from a foreign government is absurd. And so, he's also firing off, as he often does, his Truth Social posts in the middle of the night, which indicates that he's angry about this. And part of it is that, as you indicated, this is a rare issue where Republicans on Capitol Hill have dared to criticize or question the president, and they think that this could be, to borrow another idiom, not a Trojan horse but a Trojan plane.
You mentioned Republicans starting to speak out. Senator Roger Wicker said this would be, quote, like the United States moving into the Qatari embassy. And Senator Ted Cruz said, I have concerns, adding that it poses significant espionage and surveillance problems. Can you talk at a little bit more length about why it's such a major security issue?
Right. Well, again, the question is, why would the government of Qatar do this out of the generosity of its of its heart, right? Or does it want something? Oh, and even if it's just about whether it wants something from the United States, that's a big enough concern. But what if it's what if there's some subterfuge going on, right? I mean, this is the most important airplane in the United States and certainly in the world, right? I mean, arguably in the world. And so I think the concerns that Republicans have raised, rather than talk about corruption, right, which is what first comes to everybody's mind is that President Trump likes to do his corruption out in the open. And Republicans have sort of pointed to that to suggest that it's not corruption, to be taking a gift, which could be considered an emolument in violation of the Constitution. So instead of talking about this as a potentially corrupt act, they have talked about it in terms of the security concerns. And so it's, I think, safer political ground for them to talk about the security concerns than to say out and out that the president of our own party is accepting a bribe, essentially.
That is fascinating. The Republican criticism also points to something else I want to bring up. Democrats are saying they want the whole transaction scrutinized by Congress, with Chuck Schumer saying he'll place a hold on Trump nominees until that happens. Republicans aren't going to let that happen, congressional scrutiny, are they? But that seems to be a problem for them because it's so glaringly corrupt that it's hard to make disappear. And the story will continue if and when Trump continues to go through with it, and the challenges associated with it get aired out a little more. So how do Republicans handle that as it drags out? How can they hold off the congressional scrutiny while also kind of appearing concerned about it and all that?
Right. Well, the challenge for them is that this appears to be the epitome of the need of why you would have an oversight branch or the legislative branch conduct oversight over the executive branch. And of course, when there's been a Democratic president, Republicans are all too eager to sort of like invoke the solemn responsibility that the legislative branch has to conduct oversight. We saw that obviously with Hunter Biden. We saw that before with Hillary Clinton, and really with the Clintons and Bill Clinton and on down the line. And then you have, yes, while Republicans have been critical or questioning of this, they've stopped far short of saying that they're actually going to investigate it or conduct oversight or do anything to try to stop it. And it was kind of amusing to see Speaker Mike Johnson at his weekly press conference. One, he tried to draw this distinction between what he characterized, I think, very questionably as the secretive dealings of what the Republicans call the Biden crime family with what, Trump does, which is, more transparent in that he does it out in the open. And therefore, because you don't have the secrecy attached to it, it might seem to the average voter okay. And so, Johnson said whatever Trump is doing is out in the open. They're not trying to conceal anything. But then when he also said, I have a big enough job to do as the Speaker of the House. But of course, your job as Speaker of the House is partially to conduct oversight over the executive branch, whether or not that the executive branch is run by a member of your own party. And he made little effort to disguise the fact that Republican-controlled Congress is really unlikely to investigate a Republican president, no matter what the issue is. And so, he said when a reporter put this to him directly, he said, Congress has oversight responsibility, but I think so far as I know, the ethics are all being followed. And of course, that is not the standard that he would follow if Joe Biden were president, or Kamala Harris, or Barack Obama, or Bill Clinton. They wouldn't say, well, so far as I know, they're following the letter and the spirit of the law. They would say, we're going to look into it and we're going to see if they're following the letter and the spirit of the law. But they don't seem to have any intention of doing that, at least right now. Perhaps, if pressure is brought to bear by, Democrats potentially, but more notably, if pressure is brought to bear by Republicans, then perhaps that would change.
To stay up to date on all the news that you need to know, there's no better place than right here on the DSR Network. And there's no better way to enjoy the DSR Network than by becoming a member. Members enjoy an ad-free listening experience, access to our Discord community, exclusive content, and more. Use code DSR2025 for a 40% off discount on sign-up at thedsrnetwork.com/buy. That's code DSR2025 at thedsrnetwork.com/buy. Thank you, and enjoy the show.
It sure looks as if Republicans are going to have a tough time holding this off because, as you point out, the argument is so preposterous. The idea that the fact that he's doing it out in the open somehow absolves him of corruption seems pretty weak because we, A, don't know what's going on behind the scenes in his discussions between him and Qatar, and B, it's becoming an argument against scrutinizing the whole thing even more deeply, which would reveal more. It just doesn't make any sense on its face, does it?
No, but, honestly, that's been his secret sauce, is this idea that, it's kind of taking advantage of especially the media's preference for reporting what happens behind closed doors as if it is worse than what happens out in the open, right? And he's sort of, whether intentionally or not, he's recognized that. And therefore, he's just kind of names what is usually unmentionable in the past, right? He says the quiet thing out loud, as they say. And by doing so, it seems, at least to or seems to his Republican allies, that, well, if he's talking about it and if he's public about it, then there can't be anything wrong with it. But that's not how it works, right? It doesn't matter whether, if you announce that you are robbing a bank, it doesn't make it any less illegal than if you go into the bank without announcing it beforehand.
And this is clearly unconstitutional on its face. It's a violation of the Emoluments Clause. And by the way, Congress is the body who the president's supposed to go to in a situation like this to begin with. That's what the Emoluments Clause says. It says you can't take a gift like this unless it's approved by Congress.
Right. And, but we saw in his first term that there was very little accountability for when he did this in less, arguably a less egregious, but still, highly questionable ways. The use of his hotel, the promotion of his businesses, basically directing, anybody who had interest before the United States government to stay or at his various properties and hold golf tournaments there and all the rest. And that's only, of course, the tip of the iceberg. The fact that there was little accountability, certainly when Republicans controlled Congress, and then even when Democrats controlled Congress and they impeached him twice, so, over different issues, and he was not convicted, then, of course, as we've seen across a range of areas, he has acted with impunity in his second term, knowing that he is unlikely to be stopped.
Well, I want to talk about MAGA opposition to this, which is really striking in a bit of a different way. You quote MAGA influencer Laura Loomer calling this a stain on the administration, and another media influencer, Mark Levin, agreeing with her. Josh Hawley, who's a bit more in the MAGA mold than some other Republicans, says, quote, "It would be better if Air Force One were a big, beautiful jet made in the United States of America." There is a deep tension here because this whole scandal clashes so obviously with Trump's slogans like America First and Drain the Swamp, doesn't it?
No, that's right. And this has put Republicans in a very familiar, awkward position of defending moves that they would clearly denounce were they made by Democratic presidents. And so I think it's been interesting because you have seen more questioning and criticism by the people that you mentioned. Some of these people are the people that defend him down the line, no matter what he does. Now, of course, they are, as I indicated earlier, stopping well short of vowing to do anything about it. But the mere fact that they are not singing from the same page as the White House on this is certainly noteworthy and could be an indication that, again, he's always, Trump is always in search of that line that he, is there a line with him where he can't cross, where, to again quote the president from his first campaign where he said, I could shoot somebody in the middle of Fifth Avenue and, not lose any votes. Right. Is there anything that he could do that would prompt Republicans in Congress to stand up to him? And they aren't quite standing up to him yet on this, but they are certainly closer to standing up to him than they have been on many other issues.
Do you think this goes anywhere? What happens now? Does Trump eventually end up dropping this? Is there a component of MAGA that doesn't want him to drop it? How does this all play out?
The challenge with Trump is that, we'll probably be talking about something else that is arguably outrageous next week, right? That Democrats will have to respond to, that Republicans will be questioned about. Maybe the focus next week is on whether the Republicans can pass this big, beautiful bill that Trump wants. Maybe it will be something else. And so the challenge with any of these, Trump, so-called scandals is that there are so many, and nobody remembers them, or nobody, we might hear about this again in a few months when the paperwork is being, filed or submitted, if there is any paperwork to be submitted about this. And so that's the big question, I think, is whether, whether we're still talking about this in another week or two.
Well, this is the thing. It seems like this story is kind of inevitably going to be talked about again later because there will be more shoes to drop. He's going to have to say at some point that he actually is going through with this. We don't know for sure whether he will. Then there will be a focus on, as you mentioned earlier, on the security implications and the costs and the logistical problems associated with it. That brings this all back up again, doesn't it? It's not an easy story to make disappear.
Right, because if the president gets his way, eventually this airplane will be used as Air Force One. I think, again, using the past as a guide, it is easy to see that, the president quietly dropping this, right? And not, again, us not hearing much about it because he has been persuaded by his advisors that this would all be just way too complicated and not worth the fight, and maybe he will move on to some other interest. It's similar to he's saying that we're gonna the United States is gonna take over Gaza and make it into some sort of luxury resort, and everybody is like, what, really? And with what troops, right? And have we it seems like he still wants to do that, but again, this is also the kind of thing that maybe it doesn't go anywhere. And so maybe this doesn't go anywhere and we don't hear about it again.
Just to wrap this up, you guys cited a great quote from a former Air Force colonel. I want to read it. Quote, "Those of us who served in the military couldn't accept a cup of coffee and a donut at a contractor site because of the appearance of impropriety. Now Trump is taking a 747 airplane from the government of Qatar for his personal use. Grift and corruption run amok." That really captures it, because there's something about this story that for a lot of people neatly encapsulates Trump's deep contempt for the very idea of public service and the obligations that come with it. Can you talk a little bit about that? You encountered that in your reporting. You talked to others who have served the country before and felt the same way. What did you discover? Right.
Well, this is all, as you said, this has always been the issue with Trump, where when you're talking about corruption or alleged corruption, it's that what he is doing is on such a grand scale, and the laws and the rules that are actually on the book for public servants, for federal employees, for congressional staffers about accepting gifts or even taking free food at an event are so tight. They're so restrictive. There's this huge gap between what your person making, $80 or $100 or whatever $1,000 working for the government is allowed to do, and what the president of the United States appears to be getting away with. And that's where the danger is for him, because a lot of these people are nominally in his base, right? If you're talking about members of the military, for example, or really, people in the federal government, right? We talk a lot about federal employees and how they are scattered throughout the country, and they are not all Democrats and they are not all progressive. Many of them are Trump supporters or would be Trump supporters. And so that's where you see this huge disconnect. And yet, because there's so much else out there, it doesn't seem at the end of the day to always stick to him. And that's how he essentially can get away with it.
There's something so simple about this. It really captures self-dealing, and self-dealing is something people really, really hate. And this is not a hard story to grasp. It captures that perfectly. Russell Berman, thanks for talking to us, man. It was great to talk to you.
Thanks for having me.